Motiro Leadership Webinar. So we thought we'd talk about two different things. The first is about autonomy, because that's where we are now in the program. And then after that, we will link autonomy to one hot topic that sometimes is a little controversial. It also happens to be Karine's favorite soapbox, so she'll be very active. And it's about volunteer incentives, financial incentives. So, how much can we pay volunteers until we're excommunicated from the Red Cross, Red Crescent? So that will be the second topic. But what we will try to do is relate it to self-determination theory. So as you know, we try to frame everything based on current understanding of human psychology and more specifically self-determination theory. So we try to bring it back to the theories to have insights that are based also on the science and not just on our personal opinions, ideologies, or experience. The two are necessary. So we're not wedded to a particular theory. We're just using the theory to explain things. But of course, our personal experience counts also. So we're not dismissing the importance of personal experience. In the end, usually it's the personal experience that makes us give a decision anyway. So we need to be open about that. So before we start, are there any confusions or any points you would like to address? Things are not clear about the program, things that are missing in this community of practice. These webinars are a chance for us to talk and discuss on how we can also improve the community of practice. So if you have any ideas, you can say them now, or you can post them on the community of practice, or you can send us an email. But please feel free to give us feedback, because it's through your feedback that we can actually improve your experience on the community of practice.
I guess the reading lists to supplement the materials would be really great. Of course, it's not necessary that we'll read all of those or even any of those, but to be able to refer back to it sometime at some point later in the future, I guess that would be right.
Yeah, thanks, Alexi. I'm very much like you. I'm very much into reading the actual literature. There's a trick that we can all do is if we post some, like, so Alexi actually posted a few links that were actually very, very good papers that I read, and they're very valuable for a number of reasons. But there's a little trick, and that's you just click on the link and you just read the abstract. So every paper starts with a 1-paragraph summary. And if you read that, that's already pretty good. You can sort of read that, and then you can skim through the technical details and go directly to the discussion and the conclusion. So when we send references of scientific papers, it's not about reading the whole thing, because that takes about an hour, and then you just get confused because it's full of jargon and it's for really professionals in self-determination theory. But if you just read the abstract at the beginning and then the discussion and conclusion, you'll get a very good idea of what's going on here. So yes, Alexei, we'll post more. I have a whole collection. And now that you've asked, I will post more. And we'll try to link it to a specific topic. So we'll do that. That's a very good advice. Anything else? Self-determination theory happens to be an invention of Canadians and Americans. So unfortunately, it's very well known in the Anglo-Saxon world, and most of the literature is in English. But there are some very good articles in French and probably in Spanish. So I don't have access to the ones in Spanish, but there are some SDT experts that write in French, not least from Quebec. So if I find a very good paper in French, or if you find a good paper in Spanish, then we should also be able to post it. But unfortunately, most of the scientific literature on human motivation is in English. So it's not that we prefer English, it's just that's what it is. Okay, so we thought we'd start with autonomy. So you notice that we've been spending 2 or 3 weeks focusing on autonomy. Autonomy is one of the 3 basic psychological needs that Ryan and Deci have identified as the key drivers of motivation. And so when these three needs are met simultaneously, it is more likely that we are highly motivated. So when we say highly motivated, it's intrinsically motivated, or that we've internalized what we're doing in such a way that we enjoy what we're doing, or at least we're very motivated to do that. Autonomy also happens to be, of the three needs, the one that comes back the most often when we talk about leadership and transformational leadership. So self-determination theory has, or at least papers that refer to self-determination theory, and I will send you the links, have demonstrated that when a supervisor or a manager nurtures and encourages the autonomy of the members of the team, they're actually more likely not just to be more autonomous, but to develop or to satisfy their needs for competence and belonging. So if, in the same way that if you are overly controlling and you decrease the level of autonomy, then the other two needs will sort of like almost not be met either. Because if you're autonomous, you will naturally go towards where you're competent and therefore feel more competent. When you're autonomous, you will naturally go towards helping other people because we're social animals. So of the three needs, autonomy seems the one that predicts the most high levels of motivation. In the same way, low autonomy predicts low motivation and sometimes even burnout. So that's why we're spending a little more time on autonomy, and we'll probably spend a little less time on the other two needs, belonging and competence. And so some of you have posted excellent comments. I mean, they were really great comments. And you've actually linked, so what I've just said, you've actually said it in your comments, that when you feel autonomous, it happens that you also feel more competent, or when you feel more competent, it increases your autonomy. It's easier to carve out more autonomy in a domain or in a task where we feel competent. Because we're more confident that we can achieve something, and therefore we're maybe more assertive, and we manage to do things our way, just because we're naturally convincing, and we convince our supervisors and our team to allow us to do this our way. So the three needs are actually very closely knit. It's usually we need all three to be motivated, but usually when you have two, you're more likely to have the third need that's satisfied. So that's the theory. We presented, I think it was early this week, or maybe was it last week, an exercise on how to self-assess your level of autonomy and how to think about your autonomy. And it was great because some of you did practice it. So you did test the exercise. And it's great for a number of reasons. First of all, this is an exercise that we want to include in the Motiro solutions pack. And so before we include it, we want to test it first. So this community of practice, so all of us, we will be testing tools that will help us better understand and connect with our needs. And as we do that, to better understand how we can improve or how the needs of others, and therefore improve the motivation within a team. So if you haven't done so, please test this self-assessment on autonomy. Have a go at it, provide your critical feedback, and we will improve the tools with your feedback. But the idea is to have a whole collection of tools so that when a team does a MOTI survey and discusses it, they will then have options on how to improve and work on the issues that they identified in the team discussion. So autonomy often comes up, and here we want to suggest a number of exercises, activities to help build autonomy at the individual level, but also help the manager figure it out and help the whole team help each other out in being more autonomous. One of the feedback that we got, and I think it was from Alina, which sort of launched a little mini debate, was shouldn't we better define autonomy at the beginning of the exercise? So that when you reflect on your autonomy at home and at work, you know what you're thinking about. And that is the question that's really that we can discuss if you're interested, because then a few others said, well, actually, by reflecting on what it meant, I came up with my own interpretation of the autonomy that I want. And therefore, it doesn't really matter if we agree on the definition of autonomy. What counts is what would I find compelling as the definition that I am using that's relevant to my situation. So this is typically a question that needs to be discussed when we design a tool or an exercise, is how far do we go into the definitions, and how much do we count on people's intuition experience to allow them the freedom to interpret, what a concept means based on their own personality and circumstance. So that's a question for you. You don't need to answer now, but when we present these exercises, if you want to test them, give us that type of feedback, and it can lead to a discussion on the community of practice. And we might have two versions. Or we might, fork, one exercise might become two different exercises because we find that the first exercise was too ambiguous. So I can only invite you to try these exercises and to send us feedback.
A short comment on this regard, I would probably say it will probably also depend on exactly how we're going to introduce these exercises to the people, to the end users. If it is going to be done in the context of the Motiro solution spec, then it will be brought up in the course of the team discussion, and then there probably will be an opportunity to provide at least a working definition of the concept we're working with. If they are to be introduced somehow separately in an isolated way, then yeah, that might be more of an issue probably.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good point. So what I reflected on is we can imagine in the solutions pack or in the Motiro pack altogether, for each concept, a definition that people can go fetch if they feel they need it. So that means that if they want to work on autonomy and they select, that tool for autonomy, they have the possibility of clicking on the hyperlink and having a complete definition, or just to use their intuition. So there, people would be given the choice. And then, if it's during a team discussion, they can actually discuss the concept more in detail, and then it wouldn't be necessary. So that would leave the option open to the user, and they can decide whether they want to be first educated on the concept, or if they'll just go with their intuition. Yeah, so thanks, Alexia. I think that's a valid point. It depends a lot on the context. Karine or Saram, any ideas? Does somebody here find the definition or the concept of autonomy ambiguous or too broad or vague? I mean, does everybody here feel comfortable with the word autonomy?
Well, for me, I'm learning as we go along. For me, even though I believe I'm highly qualified, I have studied a lot all my life. All these terms are kind of new, and I think it's more about cultural difference. So that's why I'm so interested about learning these new terms and exploring them, because I have never done that in my life before. So it's quite interesting. So I think if we have, for me, having straight definitions is always better. But I think because I'm coming from a different perspective, but I'm learning a lot, but I'm still not quite clear about terminologies. But I'm here to learn. So
yeah, thanks, Margarita. I think that's a very good point. And even the word autonomy, first of all, I don't know how it translates in other languages, but I know that in some places where I lived, autonomy was not a good thing. It was too close to individualism, right? So, And then I remember in one country I lived in Africa, it was rude to talk about autonomy when it came to a woman. So for men, autonomy was good, but for women, it wasn't good because it meant a whole bunch of crazy things and probably in the minds of men. And so some of these words can be loaded. So I think autonomy in French and English is relatively neutral. It's rather positive. But I can imagine that in some other cultures, it might not necessarily be seen as a positive word, or its translation. So maybe by giving examples, concrete examples of autonomy, it might help. So you're right. There is a cultural aspect to this.
I may also share the feedback from my colleagues for which I conducted that kind of a webinar within the context of that mega project of Motiro introduction, which you already kindly mentioned. And some of them were actually a bit wary of the word autonomy when they heard it, because they tended to equate autonomy with lack of support on part of their supervisors. So yeah, if I'm autonomous, then that might mean that I don't need any help, any assistance, and I'm entirely on my own. So that's maybe an unfortunate implication, an unforeseen one when we use this term. But as for me, it is clear enough.
So it seems that it's like so you have autonomy in the middle, and then sometimes people take it towards independence. So it scares them because that means that it'll become anarchy, right? Everybody will do what they want. They're all independent. You can't tell them what to do anymore. So that's one fear. And then the other fear is actually the opposite, is you're left by your own devices. You're not getting any support. You're actually independent, but in a bad way. So it's probably good to sort of say also what autonomy is not. So autonomy is not left to your own devices. I mean, a good leader is actually the self-determination theory on leadership is called, let me try to remember this, leadership autonomy support. So that means the leader supports the autonomy and supports the team member so that the autonomy can be fruitful. So the more autonomy you give, the more support you need to be ready to provide, because you do want the person to go at the edge of their comfort zone by taking decisions that might be difficult decisions, taking responsibility, and so you have to be there to support that. So it is not laissez-faire. So the idea that, oh, you're fully autonomous, you do what you please, and then if you fail, it's your responsibility, and I don't need to support you because you're autonomous. That is not leadership. That is laissez-faire. That's very poor management. True leadership is you take the decision, you do what you think is best, but I'm here to support you. And if things go wrong, I have your back and I will take the blame. So that's leadership autonomy support. And that's a type of leadership that we want to promote in the Red Cross, Red Crescent, among teams of staff and teams of volunteers.
I have something to add. Sometimes you have the three basic needs. I mean, the interrelation between the three needs, and you see something is perhaps lacking in competence or in belonging, whatever, and it has an influence on autonomy as well. Then you see the person not able to be autonomous enough or not able to be self-confident enough, and then I mean not able to be really autonomous. In the way the task, even if the context is here, I mean, if you could do it, but the person is not taking this freedom. That's something that I mean was quite coming in my mind in the previous weeks. And for me, when I did the exercise, which I found very nice, I had I understand why I like so much to go to work, because I was feeling more autonomous at work than at home, because I am a mom and I have to take care of needs of kids, and then it completely disrupted your autonomy when you are at that point. So I mean, that was quite interesting to do this exercise, and I imagine in different. I mean, when I mean, the different, I mean, step of your life, the exercise could be quite different. But it explained a lot of things. It made me, I mean, reflect a lot.
Thank you. Salam.
Also, to be honest, you've highlighted something now, and I searched the translation of autonomy is the same, the translation of independence in the Arabic word. So, so when we talk with volunteers in Arabic, for the next time or in the future, we need to be more clear about what is the difference between autonomy and independence, because as a translation in Arabic, it's the same word. And no, I've noticed this. So yes, definitely we need to give more examples, and maybe to try to explain by providing a case study maybe, or to provide other examples than only translating the word.
Very interesting. Well, I see Ekaterini's here, and so I want to give her credit for this exercise, because it's Ekaterini who developed this exercise when we did the Muti exercise in Cyprus. So this is actually her creation. Well, her creation. I'm sure you've got it from somewhere, but anyway, you brought it into the Muti Solutions pack. Okay, so we're halfway.
I'm not sure what exercise you are referring to, Gabriel.
Yes, because you arrived late. Yes.
Get in.
The reflection, the self-reflection on autonomy, where you sort of like think about your autonomy and you grade yourself from 1 to 10, and then you ask yourself, how can I increase by 1 point, or you know, what would happen?
It comes
that
from
exercise.
solution focused practice.
That's right.
Original.
So anyway, so it proved very popular, I think, and I enjoy doing it myself. But what I noticed also, so this is a hope for everybody, is your autonomy increases with age. Just because when you have a white beard and you're a guy, people don't question your autonomy anymore, because you just give them the look, and then they say, okay.
I'm sure we can find something about it in literature.
We'll look for that.
We'll look for it.
Yeah, and then I'll send you the references.
Okay. Autonomy could be increasing, it could be decreasing as well with age.
Well, yes, if your health declines, and then you have, dementia, clearly it will decrease for sure. But well, it might be my case. Maybe I'm deluded and I'm actually thinking that I'm autonomous, but actually it's Alzheimer's. Yes, sorry.
No. It's the more you become aware and you accept your positive and negative and not so positive, negative parts of you, and working on yourself. It's self-awareness and self-development. If you end up being very bitter about your life, then it's not going to help.
Yes, I see your point. So a lot of it is about the narrative. It's about how we frame things, and how the stories we tell ourselves. And some stories of victimhood and of being controlled by other people, if that's the story you tell yourself, you're not going to be very autonomous. But under the same situations, if you are more aware that you can be self-determined, and you can say no, or you can do things and you can impose your will, gently, then you actually increase your sense of autonomy by being more autonomous. So a lot of it is how we frame things, right? That's what you're saying.
How the people around us accept it, and also according to whether society appreciates age and wisdom.
Yes. Absolutely. So being the wise and the old here, I suggest we move to the second part of this webinar, which is about financial incentives. And so for that, it's Karin's on her soapbox. She's taking a deep breath and hold on. Here we go.
Sorry, Gabriel, but did we give a definition of autonomy? Do you want to give a definition of autonomy? That's perhaps the final point.
So I'm here. I'm hesitant to do so because I think that, first of all, what I did is I looked into self-determination theory literature, and I got the definitions that are used in those papers. They tend to be very theoretical. They talk about agency and empowerments, and so these are just other words, other concepts. What I suggest we all do as a group, and we post in the community of practice examples of autonomy. And we have some already. So I've read some very good examples in the timeline on the community of practice of when I feel autonomous and this is what happens. So for me, those were very good examples of autonomy. So perhaps what we can do is we can provide more examples of autonomy, or we provide a definition that would work in our own culture. So then at the end, we have a collection of definitions and examples, and then we would just use these, or our favorite ones, the ones that get the most likes, and we'll put them in the tool, and we put them in the Motiro toolkit. How's that?
Okay, so we will post something about it. Okay.
Yes.
So now we move on financial incentive, because it was also a discussion recently. I think we commented a lot on financial incentives and how we can, a bit destroy the motivation. I think it was quite clear in the comments we read on the community of practice, but we would like to come back with it also with Salam. We discuss a way. So perhaps we can just take the two questions that are right now on the community of practice. I go back to the timeline, sorry. Do you have questions about financial incentives that you would like to discuss? That's the first question. And the second question would be, what is the practice you have in your experience in that regard in your national societies, and its impact on the volunteer motivation? So should we start with the first question? If you have some specific question about it. Not everybody at the same time. No question. So it's clear for you. Yeah.
I have well, I'm not sure I'm answering the question.
No, a comment, whatever.
Yes.
A reaction.
Okay. When I was with the health department at the IFRC, providing financial incentives or per diems or whatever you want to call it to community health workers was not taboo. It was something that was done because in the mind of the project managers, something needed to be done in the next 3 months. It was short term, and therefore what counted was the delivery of the service, and people did not expect the volunteers to stay with the National Society. So they had a public health approach. They didn't have a Red Cross approach. They had a public health approach. So for example, if there was a water and sanitation project, they just got funding from a big organization, they're going to put water and sanitation equipment in 20 villages. They had 6 months to do it. So they would the National Society would recruit volunteers within the communities, pay them, and then they would install the equipment and do some hand washing promotion. And then the idea was that they were injecting money into these communities, but because these volunteers belong to very poor communities, by giving them per diems, the Red Cross was actually injecting resources and money into the community. So the community was benefiting twice. Once because it had, water and sanitation equipment and hand washing stuff, and on top of that, a lot of families got some money. So it was difficult to convince the health department that this was a bad thing. So I'm wondering
why would Salam, you want to react?
Yes, I've had a question came to my mind now. What will happen to the National Society services when the fund has come to an end? This is what we should to think about.
It's over.
Well, that's it. It wasn't a service. It was a project. You see, so you have some national sites have services that are supposed to last, 20 years, but sometimes there are situations or projects that are not services. They're actually, you deliver equipment or it's a one-off thing, and it's not meant to last. So what is meant to last is the equipment. So they set up a committee that maintains the equipment, right? So the wells or whatever, the latrines, and it's built in such a way that it requires minimal maintenance, and so it's not seen as a service. It's seen as something that lasts 1 year, and after that, nothing, it stops.
They don't want to be that this service become sustainable for the long term. Yes, for example, as they think that they are not funding some project or volunteering activity that they are aiming to be sustainable for 5, 6, or 10 years. Maybe they are funding just the projects that provide some equipment in shelters or ITSs or something like that.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah.
But then my
Because-
question, why should it be done by volunteers?
So those are not
They are
volunteers.
paid. So why are
So
they
they shouldn't be called
volunteers?
volunteers. They should be
Yeah.
called community workers
That's
and
the
all
point.
that. Right.
That's the
But
point.
we call them volunteers because we're the Red Cross, and it's we're a way of saying that we're better than Save the Children. Because and the
Yes.
volunteers get less money than local staff.
Definitely, yes.
And they don't work like staff. The local staff work 40
But
hours.
it's okay. They have a mandate, a per diem, and a different kind of relationship. But it's a work relationship. That's the difference.
I'm just saying, right. So
That's the
what
difference.
I'm saying is there are different circumstances, and maybe there should be different status. Right now, we're very simplistic. We have, on one hand, we have paid staff, and the other hand, we have volunteers, and there seems to be nothing in between. It's
In between, yeah.
all black
And
and all white.
no, there is something in between, but it's a taboo.
It's a
Or we don't
taboo,
talk
okay.
about it. But
Well,
there is
tell me
something.
how you-
There are a lot of examples.
But one question, for me, giving a volunteer per diem is totally okay, because it's not a payment, it's just providing them some support for the work they're doing, either for transportation or food. I was in Mozambique, and then for operations, we were dealing with paid volunteers, and it was a support to the community, as Gabriel just mentioned, and everybody was excited and happy. It was not long term, it was just for, I think, the first 6 months. We paid volunteers. The ICRC was paying volunteers as well, and it worked well. I didn't see any issues.
It depends on the amount of money. If it's really if it's neutral, I mean, in the end, if it's reimbursing the expenses, the equipment, I don't know, the cost they have to carry out the task, whatever, it's okay. It's fully okay.
Well,
To
it's
have a per
okay
diem.
based on our policies or our idea of what volunteering is. But you can say a little more. These people, so you reimburse their transportation, their lunch, but a lot of these volunteers have families, and they happen to be available, but they are also spending some time. And as they do that, they're not earning for their families. So you can take the logic one step further and saying, well, we're not going to pay them full-time salaries because we cannot afford it, but we will, recognize the fact that they are working, 15 hours per week, and that's more than the 2 hours, and therefore there should be a compensation for the time spent, beyond transportation and food and lodging. So,
But this is an extra category. Then it's not more it's not
Yes.
any more volunteering.
So we
what
have
is it?
maybe we have in these cases that one person play 2 roles. One role as a volunteer and providing some activities for free in the national society, and another role, but from the same person, who is a daily worker, as we can say, and provide some support for some project in this case. But the issue that that came here, for example, in the example that that Margarita gives in the ICRC, they provide per diems for volunteer for projects for 6 months. The question is, what happened to those volunteers after those 6 months? Will still supporting the national societies, or no, they are searching for another opportunities with another NGOs, for example, maybe Save the Children or another parties. So this approach to pay per diem for the volunteer, it's not encouraging for the retention. It's not good, healthy for the retention of volunteer, because they are searching for somewhere where they can get money to cover their minimum expenses of the day, especially in the areas where there is a financial needs for the communities, or there is an economic issue in those communities. So this is a critical approach, I think.
Yeah, but if you need the work supply, like in that case for an operations, you need volunteers and you need to engage them some way, and then the incentive of the money always help. So otherwise, yeah, maybe it's not retention in the long term, but at least you get the project done. So for me, it's a win-win also. And then if they leave after the project, then well.
Maybe I can be clear from the first of the project that is not a volunteering task. Maybe it's a per diem task, or another task that you can cover if you want. So if you want to cover this task, you can get this per diem in return, but this is not your main volunteering activity.
Yeah, I agree.
So we almost agree on the third category, no?
What you want to call them?
Yeah, whatever.
Well, I have another point, because we're talking about retention. So we're saying if you pay volunteers and then you stop paying them, you lose your volunteers. You cannot retain them. Now, imagine that you don't pay the volunteers. How do you retain them? Because retention of volunteers also comes at a cost.
Yes.
You need to engage with them. You need to provide maybe opportunities to volunteer, or at least activities, or you need to meet them or provide training. So to retain a volunteer is also a cost. So I understand that if you pay them well and then you stop paying them, well, they actually came to be paid, so you're not paying them, so they're not a volunteer. But imagine for a second that you didn't pay them. How would you better retain them if you hadn't paid them? Because you can reverse the logic, say, well, the Red Cross was very generous with me, and so I will stay a volunteer in the hope that I will get hired for another project and be paid again. So I'm not sure that retention is improved if you don't pay volunteers. I don't think that I'm not sure I get the incentives for somebody to stay longer because they have no hope of being paid than to leave because they stop being paid and they might be paid later. You see what I mean? I think retention I don't think it's a question of retention.
Definitely, there is a cost that we want to take it into consideration to retain and to motivate volunteer, but we don't want to provide this as a financial incentive for volunteer. This is a cost that we want to calculate with the budget of the project, that is goes under training, under equipment, for example, the uniform and the boots for the volunteers, and other things, yes, but it's not as a cash money that we want to provide them to the volunteer.
Or trainings. Maybe. Yeah, trainings.
Yes, trainings is definitely a good, very important opportunity. Maybe other development opportunity for the volunteers, or maybe retreat day at the end of the project.
I'm right now discussing with our emergency response unit team, and we'll organize soon a workshop about this for the operations they have, the big operation they have, and really, they want also to really put into practice the volunteering policy. So volunteering policy status that, volunteering should be neutral, so volunteer should neither gain or lose from its volunteer activity. So they are also discussing the model and the role. So it has to do also with how long are you being involved in the activity? Is it 2-3 hours a week? Is it 20 hours a week? Then of course it's a different commitment. Then you have to earn your living, and you cannot do this for free. I understand it. So then we have to adjust the categories. In the other and in the end, it doesn't change. It's just the way you name the people, or you name those categories, because they already get per diem. So it's not gonna change the practice. The time you work, the roles they have, they are assigned, the activities they do. Perhaps volunteers do more basic, and perhaps supervisors with per diem have more coordinator activity or role, and this all the discussion we have. But I think we also have to make some kind. I mean, the volunteering policy is clear. And we should use it more in where we work as a national society.
So Alexi made a good point in the chat, and it's really about financial sustainability.
Exactly.
So, okay, so in a way,
That's it.
we have this beautiful concept of volunteering, where people, it's volunteer service. You don't do it for gain, but behind it is a economic reality that we cannot pay people forever, especially if they have not much to do, and so that it's not sustainable. So it really comes back to the economics of, or the business model of a national society. The business model is that it is more sustainable to have volunteers, i.e. cheap labor, than it is to retain people with financial incentives in the long term. So it's a little disingenuous, if I may. It seems to be a little self-serving, and when you look at it that way.
I don't know if somebody wants to give some more examples or exchange, or have question about it.
No, but really, I can't but agree. Can't but agree with what Gabriel just said, because in the end, it's not an accident that it's only 4 first fundamental principles that are shared by all the major humanitarian organizations, like humanity and partiality, neutrality, and independence, but not the 3 other ones, and not the voluntary service, because it is in fact entirely possible to adhere to the first 4 ones without the last 3 ones without voluntary service. And it is in fact entirely possible to be a major humanitarian organization without resorting to the volunteers on a major scale, or even at all. It's just that it is, if you wish, it's maybe our competitive advantage sometimes in an economical sense, rather than the sheer impossibility of doing anything without volunteers at all. It is preference in economic way in terms of the access to the communities, to the outreach and everything, but it shouldn't be thought that the mere fact that the people are not paid means that they are more skilled or more qualified or whatever.
Yeah, I agree. And also the fundamental principle is about voluntary action and not working for free. So in French, we distinguish bénévole from volontaire, but in English, it's volunteer all the same. The fundamental principle is voluntary action. This means that I do something because I want to do it. It's actually self-determination. So voluntary action is that I'm fully self-determined when I choose to do something with the Red Cross. I'm not doing it for the money, so I'm not controlled by gain or greed. I do it because I believe it's the right thing to do, but that does not mean that I will do it for free necessarily. So I believe in the fundamental principles. I believe in voluntary action. I'm applying voluntary action to myself, but I'm a paid staff. So voluntary action applies to me. If my boss tells me to do something that I believe is wrong, I will say no, because I'm in the Red Cross. It's voluntary action. I cannot be coerced into doing something. So let's not forget that the fundamental principle is not volunteering as in doing things for free. It's about self-determination. Everything I do is self-determined, and I'm not coerced to do anything.
Any other example or comments on how you practice this on your
So Ekaterini will provide us an example, because in Cyprus, staff is requested to volunteer. So if you're Cyprus Red Cross staff,
forced.
Sorry?
They are expected to.
Right,
So
they're pressured.
Forced, they feel forced.
They feel pressured into volunteering. So I work 35 hours a week, and I'm paid for those 35 hours, and then I'm strongly encouraged over the weekend to volunteer in one of the programs for 2 or 3 hours. So is that volunteering?
Not if you're forced to do it.
Exactly.
And you feel obliged, and you feel that you're being checked, and you would be told about not doing it, and nobody will be satisfied and say thank you. So it involves a lot of things.
Exactly. So when we did the MOTI exercise in Cyprus, that came up. It did come up. So it was a problem because it wasn't voluntary action anymore, and it wasn't working for free, because you already paid a full salary. All it did, it only decreased your hourly wage. That's all it did. So it was like working for less money, because if you divide what you got at the end of the month by the number of hours worked, whether it was as a volunteer or a staff, you end up earning less. And then you got the pressure, that if you didn't do it, then you weren't seen as a proper volunteer, a proper Red Crosser.
We had this even during the MOTI days.
Yes.
The MOTI marathon days. We had staff that were forced to work during the actual training, and I had to ask them to turn off their computers.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I remember that.
Any other question? Because on the community of practice, I think we also had the case where volunteer had to pay.
Yes, I believe that's in Mexico, no? Or at least they have to pay for their uniform. How does that go?
A uniform, and was Nancy? Was it you? Yeah, well, this is quite discouraging, and I think
no, it's not necessarily discouraging. I'm not sure it's discouraging.
Is it discouraging?
I would say it would maybe depend on how you frame it.
Or disqualifying, at least for some people.
It actually depends on how it actually works. When I went to Austria for the humanitarian education meeting, I was actually surprised and shocked that as we were discussing lots of things, I forget the name of the person that was responsible at the time. He said that people were proud to be doing anything with the Red Cross, so they would save money to buy the shirt of the Red Cross to be able to wear it. All right. But in that case, they had the Red Cross starting from nursery school in every level of the schools. So the children would learn volunteering, would learn the value of volunteering, the logic behind it. Why bother? Why is it worth it? So practically they would save money, was what really stayed in my mind, to be able to buy a hat, to be able to buy a shirt, to be able to wear that when they go out.
It's also because they are proud, perhaps.
Exactly. So it depends on how you actually put it in the culture, in the education. The Red Cross was present in the education in the adult levels from nursery school. So the Ministry of Education was supporting the whole thing. So they were cultivating the idea of volunteering and what you gain, what you're offering, and that it's really worth it. So it depends on how you actually give it out. to people and to the society?
It probably also depends on the reputation of the national society in the country. So there's some national societies that have a great reputation, and so people wearing or saying they belong to the Red Cross or that are volunteer for Red Cross, it really it's a source of pride for them and of status. And we actually capture that with Moti, by the way. How much your community appreciates what you're doing for the Red Cross, Red Crescent. So maybe it says a lot about the standing and the reputation of a national society when people are ready to, when volunteers themselves are ready to pay for their uniform or to save money to buy a hat. It's actually it's a good dynamic. I think it's a positive dynamic. And then who would it discourage? Because I don't think we would want people who have absolutely no money to spend, time and give. But there are enough people, fortunately, in countries like Mexico, there are enough people, who are rich enough to buy their uniform. And so it shouldn't be a discouragement in any way. I would imagine that, where I lived in Burkina Faso, where people, don't have a shirt, it would not be fair to ask them to buy a shirt. So I think it depends on the country, the socioeconomic status, and on the reputation of the national society. So if the national society is in the middle of scandals, financial scandals, I mean, you would feel silly, giving it money and buying your uniform. But on the contrary, if it's really doing great work in your community, then you would be advertising by wearing the T-shirt, the uniform.
Salam wanted to say something.
Yes, I think that is something in the status of each national societies, or maybe in the federation also, that members should pay a subscription fees, annual subscription fees, or something like that. We are not talking about this kind of payment, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, just to make sure.
But I think there's some countries where when you become a volunteer, you can elect the board or whatever.
Yes.
And in that case, you pay a subscription fee.
Yes.
And it gets very difficult because I've heard that in one African country that I will not name, the branches recruit people, they get the subscription fees, but on the records, they have absolutely no volunteers because they're keeping the subscription fees for themselves and they're not setting them upwards. So it doesn't always work.
They are not producing ideas or sending them ideas for those new recruits.
No, those new recruits don't even exist, even though they've paid a subscription fee.
So I don't know, we're close to the end. So I don't know if you have other questions or comments about this. Yeah.
Something else on the Austrian Red Cross. It was Karl Zahuber I was talking with. They actually had a restaurant in the Red Cross, and all staff and volunteers could have lunch there for free. That was a great incentive, great appreciation of your work. That was another thing that really impressed me.
Okay, that makes sense. It brings people together. So
yeah, exactly. Because people could get together and eat and chat. So they could even discuss the project or whatever over lunch. People didn't have to be isolated.
Right, and you mix staff and volunteers.
Yeah, yeah. So that work really worked, but I understand they worked on this for years and years. They built all of this, but it was really worth it.
Very nice. Very nice conclusion, Ekaterini. Do we want to sum up, or perhaps Gabriel, you want to give? We'll have the next webinar in 1 month. What are the next topics? I think we will go on the other needs.
That's right. So,
sorry, excuse me, please. Can I make a very small announcement now?
Please.
Yes.
Yeah, just that. I mean, if you really get interested in this financial incentives topic, then I believe that towards the end of June, I don't know the precise date yet. The IFRC will host a webinar, as they do the monthly webinars on the volunteering development, volunteering engagement. and they asked myself to present next month. And I believe that among the topics I will raise and will touch upon during my presentations will be precisely our Ukrainian cross society experience with paying incentives to volunteers. So I mean, how we got hooked upon them and how we're now trying to wean off the financial incentives. So I mean, if you're interested to know how it works in practice and how it was, how it is, and how it hopefully, at least in our national society, just for the sake of maybe comparing it and congratulating yourself that your situation is much better than ours, so then yeah, you're very welcome to attend.
So this is a webinar on the same community of practice on the.
Well, I
who's
don't really
organizing
know.
this?
On Monday or on Tuesday, next Monday or next Tuesday, I'll meet for the first time the I4C host site, and then they'll tell me the details. But it's some webinar, which their monthly webinar, which they hold for the national societies on volunteer engagement. I honestly, I've never attended those before, so I don't know the details yet. But
Okay.
if it's interesting, I might, once I find out, I might post it in the community of practice in
Yes,
case
please
someone
do.
is interested.
Please,
Please do. Please
do
post
it.
it. Yeah.
We will follow up. We're very interested. This is it.
Yeah. Sorry for interrupting. Yeah.
No,
No,
don't
it's
worry.
good.
You're welcome. And Gabriel, perhaps the introduction for perhaps what we do next month and the next webinar in 1 month.
So next webinar in 1 month, what we'll try to do, and I hope the pace is not too slow or too quick. It's difficult to assess that, but we'll go through the 2 other needs, so belonging and competence. We'll try to introduce tools that you can test and have a discussion about these. And then I might end up sending you a quiz, so you can get more points. I'm a little late on that. The quiz is ready. I just didn't want to disrupt the discussions around autonomy. And then just stay tuned. Come and visit the community of practice as often as possible, because that's where, as you notice, this is where the action is. And it's not too late to invite colleagues to join. We'll probably have a webinar at one point where we, include new people, so they can sort of catch up and not be too lost and confused. And again, if you have any questions, you can post them on the timeline, because if you have a question, it's very likely that others have the same question, so that way we can answer everybody. And then I'll be working on autonomy, on trying to, with you, to try to find definitions and examples of autonomy that work in different cultures, so that way it will help inform the people who want to work on their autonomy, either individually or in teams. And I think that's it.
Yeah, thanks a lot to all your comments and your participation. It was a lot of fun today. Again. See
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Do we have a date for June?
Yeah, in 4 weeks.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
See you.
I'll post it. I'll post it as very soon.
All right. Okay. All the best.
Bye bye. Have a nice end of
Bye
the
for
week.
now.